G'day Battlers and welcome to the G'day Battlers podcast, episode 26. Unlike last week's kerfuffle where I may have told Debbie the wrong thingamajiggy. But that is all in the past because today we've got two brand new Aussies who, well, maybe not that brand new because we did talk to them about, 11 months ago on the podcast. I mean, one of them was literally on the first episode of the podcast. But, I'm rambling now and I'm refusing to let my co-host, Debbie Pebble, speak. Hi, Debbie.
Hi, I'm here. Yep.
Yeah, clocking in, we've confirmed sign of life. But today we're going to be talking to I guess Queenslander battlers, as we can now officially refer to them, Mikey and Fishylegs2. So, Fishy, Mikey, welcome in to the podcast again.
Welcome.
Hey.
Hey, how we doing?
Not too bad. How are you guys?
Good. We've cracked our first bottle of red. We're chilling out. We're happy.
Yep, doing all right. Just getting over some jet lag, but other than that, life is grand.
Yeah, I think the bottle of red is certainly a recipe for a good podcast. But we'll obviously get to your reasoning for the jet lag a little bit later in the podcast. But obviously, we have to start with the blah blah blah, the important bits, the who the heck are you people for those that are new to the podcast. So I guess we'll just start with you, Mikey Morgs. Do you just want to sort of give us the quick rundown of sort of, who you are, when you jumped into PvP, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, yep. So my name, screen name, as Steve said, is Mikey Morgs. I have been playing Pokemon Go since the day that it was released. Like everybody, feel like you've probably heard this 100 times, but like everybody, I took a little break just after Gen 2 was released. I picked it back up again when I was playing in London, when I was living in London, because I had no friends and I needed a way to meet people, and the community aspect was really big in North London Pogo. I started playing PvP pretty casually, but I started playing before GBL and before the mini games in the charge attacks and that sort of thing, because the Sylph tournaments that we had were at the pub, and I thought that was a good way or a good excuse to have a beer and chat with a couple of people, and then also do Pokemon at the same time. And that's sort of how I got into it originally, and then GBL started, came back to Australia during COVID. And was I was playing a bit, and I'd hit Legend a couple of times, but I wasn't really focusing on the game itself, or I didn't really know anything about the Championship series. And then there was a regional in Sydney, which I thought that I'd go to because I was working so much I couldn't really go to any of the others. So I went to the regional in Sydney, and I actually did quite well. I finished third. And then went to Worlds, and I've done a fair bit this season.
Yeah, I think that the 2023 season was certainly a bit of a kickoff point for not only sort of, I guess, your Play Pokemon series intro, which, I mean, it literally was, but also into sort of, I feel like a lot of the country being aware, or not even just all of the country, all of the world sort of knowing who you are a little bit more as well. So,
Rumor has it that he's still playing because he still hasn't found any friends.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Trying hard.
Still working.
And, I actually really, a lot of PvP players don't love the game as much as I love the game. Like, I love most of the aspects of Pokemon Go. Like, I really enjoy going out, walking, and manually catching. Like, I've never used a Go Plus, or any of that sort of stuff. So I manually catch everything, and I've manually caught, 320,000 Pokemon or something like that. And, before the remote raid change and all of that, I really, really love raiding. I loved raiding. I do the 3-hour raid days and actually walk around with a big group of people and do the raids for the whole 3 hours. But I don't really need a raid anymore because I've got pretty much everything built. So,
yeah, I remember in Yokohama looking at your account, and it was a very impressive and prolific account. I was just like, very impressed with the amount of shinies and legendaries that you've powered up. It's like, okay, this is a well invested account.
Yeah, as I said, like a lot of, I feel like a lot of the Pokemon Go PvPers, they play multiple video games, and I don't. I have one game that I play, which is Pokemon Go, and I did love Pokemon as a kid growing up. In fact, the first Pokemon game that I ever played was Pokemon Red, and I bought that on release, even though I was like 7 years old. I convinced my father that it would make a great birthday present for my mother, and she didn't want to play it, so I played it, and that sort of started the love. But I don't really do much in the way of video games outside of Pokemon Go.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, similar camp for sure. It's definitely a game that can pretty much catch all. But obviously, plenty to talk about as we get into the podcast. But Fishylegs as well. Do you want to give that a little bit of an intro as to who you are to those who may not already be familiar, or even just may recognize the name but don't just know what you've actually accomplished in the background?
Yeah. So I'm Fishylegs2. My account is old as 2016, but I didn't really play a lot at the start of the game. I got into it more during COVID, especially at uni, just with a couple of mates, just playing while we should be paying attention in class. And then sort of took up the Sylph side of things and got into battling from there, and got hooked pretty immediately with PvP. And then I got introduced into the faction side of thing, and that's when I really got pretty invested in getting better at the game and following along the competitive circuit. So when the Play Pokemon series dropped, I made my way down to Brisbane for that, and I got second against Valiant Vish. And then so I didn't play another championship series after that until Worlds. So that was a big break between, I think it must have been December to August the next year. So that was a big learning curve at Worlds. But since then, I've done a bit of casting here and there, and I also got top 8 in Brisbane this year and qualified my way to Worlds through the local point system.
Yeah, you've both certainly done a lot, but of course, Fishylegs, you've come along with. We talked about it on the podcast a few months ago now at this point, but talking about the Perth Regional Championship stream that we had you on at casting as well. So definitely sort of a few other bits to talk about as well. But you mentioned that you sort of jumped into the Brisbane Regional in 2023, as it dropped was the words you were mentioning. Was there any thought to come to one of the 2022 tournaments? I assume we only had Melbourne and Perth in that very first year. Perth is a little bit far away.
Lies.
But was there any thought to far away from us? But was there any thought of trekking down to Melbourne, or was it just a little bit too far at the time?
Melbourne was definitely on the cards, but I think the trip was just going to be a bit expensive. And Brisbane was only an hour's drive away, so that made that a lot easier. Definitely have wanted to go to Melbourne every time it's been held, but haven't been able to make it work yet. So that's possibly on the cards for the 2025 circuit.
Can we hold you to that? Is that
I'll drag him down there. Don't worry.
Right, thanks, Mikey. We needed someone to do it.
Yeah, Mikey's going to pay for my flights. I'll head down.
I won't pay for his flights, but I'll make sure he comes because we know that it's going to be OCIC. So.
This might be a bit copium. It's cool.
All I can picture is just like Mikey picking up Fishylegs like a backpack and just piggybacking you. Just all right, let's go.
We're pretty much the same height. I don't know how it's going to work.
Well, get enough red out and.
And
you're not wrong.
Just you can start gymming now. We'll all be in Honolulu at some point. But touching back onto the 2023 season, and both of you guys were very much as one and done. Obviously, we didn't have the champion point system back then. I suppose now in reflection, although we have already done a podcast with you guys, and if people want to listen back, they can go back to that podcast to refresh. But how did you guys feel now, like in comparison, going, I suppose, having something done so quickly back then?
Sorry, to clarify, are we talking how do we feel this year compared to last, or how do we feel the first time around?
Yeah, like the 2023 season where you guys just did a regional and you just qualified.
Yeah, that was a surreal feeling, right? Because Especially for Brisbane, it was a day or two after the changing season, and a new meta had just dropped, and all of a sudden, Flyers and Lantern were very good. So to sort of like head down with maybe 2 weeks of kind of prepping, but also like I don't know what's going to change in the meta scene, to rocking up at Worlds and having a tough, not Worlds, sorry, Brisbane, and having a sort of tough run, losing to Vish early, and then having to back up against people like Rick Flareon and Gorn 1001 and those kind of players. I was just sort of on survival mode, I think, throughout the tournament, and then I got to the grand final and thought, wow, I've actually just somehow qualified my way to Worlds. And it didn't really feel real until like later in the year, because it was such a long gap between qualifying and competing. I was like, surely, like this is all just some sort of dream that I've had, and it's all fictional. But no, it was the real deal. Hey.
Yeah, no, that was like, because that was the start of November. Oh no, start of December was that Brisbane tournament, and then Worlds is obviously in August. So had a full like 8 or 9 months to just stew on that, like pretty baller success, I will say. Like it was pretty, obviously I feel like it was very early on in the Play Pokemon series history, in the sense that we'd only had 2 tournaments before that. So we'd sort of obviously had our Perth legends in Avrip and Rob Drogo. And at the Melbourne one, we had Rick Flareon and Valiant Vish sort of already making names for themselves as 2 of the best in Australia. And so, as you said, you did go on a bit of a gauntlet through that Brisbane tournament. And I think sort of started to make some reputation known for sure in in 2 ways, not only in that sense, but also in the sense of Brisbane was very much the meta-defining tournament in a lot of ways. In all of the Americans were sort of watching on to see what the meta actually was for their tournament later on that weekend.
Absolutely.
Like, okay, what did
And I think my experience was kind of the inverse of that, because my regional was one of the last regionals of the season for people to qualify. It was certainly the last in Australia, and it was one of the latest ones out of anybody, because that was in April. And we had, I mean, you competed, Steve. I think that was your famed Whalmer tournament. And we had a pretty stacked tournament that day, and we still had 54 players. And there were the 2 groups. There was Group A and then Group B, and everybody labelled Group B the group of death before the tournament. And this was my first tournament that I'd ever been to, and I got up at like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, and drove out to Sydney Olympic Park, and then walked in, and the setup was not like any of the regionals this season, because this season the regionals have all been in the exhibition halls. But you might remember the regional in Sydney, it was like arena stadium seating.
Yeah.
And I was like, how have I not come to one of these before? And then I have not experienced that sensation since, because you walked in and you were standing 5 meters above where the competitor floor was, looking down stadium seating to the competitor floor.
That's cool.
And so you actually got a really great scope of everything. And so that made the heart start to race a little bit, I think. And then, in this group of death, I had a pretty, I had a round 1 bye, which was pretty lucky. And then I had a couple of early matches that were pretty, they were pretty tough. In fact, the only match game that I lost in the group stage was in my second match against Pokemon 12 Master, who's one of Bamboss's students. And then I had to battle Inner Bloom and Rick Flareon. And an interesting quirk is that I've battled those 2 guys in Sylph before, but I had never beaten either of them. In fact, I don't think I'd ever taken a game off either of them before, and I managed to sweep both of them, because I don't think they were really expecting me to play how I did. And unfortunately, they decided that they'd do day 2 on that evening instead of doing a day 2 for the finals. So by the time the finals came around, I mean, it had been a really, really long day, and I just wasn't mentally conditioned for it. And Magikarp and Rick both outplayed me. But I got my my Worlds qualification, and I was not expecting that at all. So, yeah, it was it was an experience, and I really hope that they could do another Sydney regional like that because the actual atmosphere and the setup was sensational. It was really cool.
Yeah, it's one of the most unique Australian regionals they've ever been because, I mean, obviously you guys, neither of you are there, but I think 2022 in particular was probably even less impressive than you could possibly imagine. Like we were shoved into this random, like at Melbourne, I'm thinking of specifically, we were shoved into this random little hall with like the judge's chair up one side of the room. It was this tiny little thing. All of the other games were in like sort of some sort of proper hall, but only Pokemon Go was separated out for our contingent of, I don't know, 30 something people. Or actually, it must have been bigger than that because I think they were saying that it was the biggest tournament in Australia at that point, at that Melbourne regional. So not bigger, not Sylph included, but it was pretty shabby. And so Sydney was not only a step up from the regular regionals in terms of that feeling, that vibe, but just a pretty big step up from a tiny little room on the side as well. But as you said, Mikey, I mean, not only did you have to go through a gauntlet, but it was a massive day. I mean, we had a 3-hour delay to actually get started. We didn't get started till like after lunch because there were some bracket issues, and then they ended up pushing the games to play out through to like 7 p.m. or something. I think we didn't leave.
We
until
started
7:30.
the finals at 6:35 p.m.
Yeah, and it went like pretty much all the way, right?
Yeah, that was the winners' final, and we had to wait around for about 2.5 hours. And I just know, as I said, I just wasn't mentally conditioned for it. I'd never done a tournament before, and you know, I'd had a pretty big sort of 2 or 3 days before that with work and other stuff. So, and you know, when you're playing against someone as talented and as you know, I guess professional as Magikarp and Ric Flareon, if you're down 5%, you know, you lose. And so any kind of lapse, you sort of struggle to compete in what was going to be a pretty tough match anyway. And there were some really strong players that were there that season. I know that, you know, Valiant Vish was competing that tournament. Gone was competing that tournament. Anikor that has qualified for Worlds in Europe. He was there that tournament as well. So there was some really strong players there, and it was a big day, and it was full on. But it was a great first experience, really. So yeah, really pleased and proud with the performance, but wish that I would have done a little bit better in the finals.
Yeah. Although obviously, like, again, you got the Worlds invite, which was the big important thing. Although I did notice that in listing out all of those really good battlers that were competing, you didn't actually mention me. Was that a mistake?
Well, we didn't have to battle each other, and you know, you were using Whalmer and I had Toxapex, so I wasn't too worried about coming across the legend that is PvP Steve.
Okay. I see. Yeah, I'll just note that. Sure.
It just I remember Sydney in particular because I was a side topic of the conversation. I was meant to come over to Sydney and surprise you guys at the dinner, and my flight got cancelled last minute. Thank you, Virgin Airlines. So yeah, it was when I heard that you guys were all knackered by the end of it and everyone just went home, I was like, oh, okay, there's no socials afterwards. Everyone was so tired because they just crammed it into one day. I'm just like, well, maybe that was a blessing.
Debbie, I'm really sorry to break this to you. Steve is obviously trying to make you feel better. We all went for dinner afterwards.
Oh no, we went for dinner, but like everyone had sort of left by like 9 or something. Like,
I mean, to be frank, I think I had a beer and then I drove off because it's you know, Homebush is about almost an hour away from everywhere in Sydney. So, yeah, really long day.
Yeah. No, there was no like, you know, Macca's run or karaoke at the end of it. So yeah, I think everyone was quite tired by that point. But again, the 2023 season, both of you punching a ticket to Worlds at your respective regionals. Now the next topic is talking about how was Worlds? Like we all, you know, we haven't actually had a chat with you guys since then. Open floor. in who would like to discuss what happened at Worlds. Whoever wants to jump in first, no pressure.
Look, we can skip the world's topic if we want.
I can hear someone pouring some red.
Yeah, it's that was to help me get through this next topic. Look, Worlds was an amazing experience. Tournament wise, I personally had a tough run, and I paired up with Pato Man in round 1, which many people will know is a top battler in the European scene. And he went on to do quite well at Worlds, but he swept me round 1, and then round 2 I managed to find my way up against Doombug 97. And if you haven't heard of Doombug 97, you don't know PvP. So he also gave me the O2 flick, and I was out of Worlds without a game to my name. But look, it was an amazing experience regardless, right? Because just being able to meet and mingle and experience the atmosphere of the World Championships in Japan, it was just an unreal thing. And so, look, I was disappointed with my performance, but I had some tough opponents, and that's Worlds. You don't go in there expecting it to be easy, right? So that's how my take on it is.
Yeah, if anything, added fuel to the fire, right? So now that you have experienced Worlds, you're kind of like, okay, I've already got a taste for it. I know what I'm getting into for the next lot. But yeah, Mikey, how was your Worlds experience?
Yeah, Worlds 2023, aka Sweatfest 2023, because it was hotter than the surface of the sun in Japan that time of year. The whole experience was it was two-sided experience really. First Go Fest was awesome in Osaka. I know that we ran into each other at the monorail station, and we walked around for a bit before I took off to be my Pokemon Go diehard, running around catching stuff. And then at Worlds itself, I had a really strong start actually. I played against two Japanese battlers, and if you know anything about the PJCS qualifying circuit they have to go through, it is so difficult. It is more difficult than almost anywhere in the world, because you have to wait and get into a tournament on a lottery in the Pokemon Center, and then you have to win and qualify for the PJCS tournament via best of one battles. And then at PJCS, the tournament itself, I think that I've got that correct, PJCS. The tournament itself, you have to play on your own devices in this, in just the most intense, stacked tournament battle. And so I played against these two battlers that were both really good, and I managed to sweep both my opening 2 rounds. But, being a relative novice when it comes to the tournament side of things, I got on stage on stream for winners round 3, and I sort of mentally collapsed a little bit. I cracked under pressure, and one of the things that happens when you get into that situation is you start thinking too much as opposed to playing what's in front of you. So rather than playing instinctively, I was overthinking that I knew what was coming in the back for this for my first battle there. And so I led Lantern into his Umbreon. Other way around. I led Umbreon into his Lantern, and I dropped a shield, and then he brought Medicham into my Umbreon after I took out his Lantern, and I had Charm, Shadow A9, and Medicham in the back, and the wheels were turning, thinking it's got to be Sableye in the back for this kid, and he had Stunfisk in the back, but I brought Medicham into Medicham instead of bringing A9, and after that, I sort of collapsed pretty hard, which was a good learning experience. It's just a shame that the learning experience had to happen on the world stage on stream in front of everybody, but definitely something that I've taken out of that for moving forward. But the rest of the tournament, I mean, you guys were there. It's wild. The noise that you hear from the crowd when the battles are going on, especially listening to the Unite crowds. They were loud. You felt like you were at Euro 2023 with soccer crowds chanting how loud they were, and I definitely think that I'm probably in a better headspace for Hawaii because of that experience, and hoping that it is not quite so hot and humid as it was in Yokohama.
Yeah, I
Good
think
luck
we
with
have a
that.
slightly
Summer in Hawaii, hey?
better time of the year. But you hit on something that Debbie and I remember sort of speaking about this on the podcast, a year ago when we were on the first Road to Worlds series. But it's that lack of exposure that Australia has had to sort of being on stream. And it's not like it's sort of something that you can easily neglect as something that isn't that important or that different, but it is sort of this different vibe where everyone's eyes are sort of on you. You're in this very different environment than you have been for literally every other game you've played forever. And in Australia, up to that point, we'd only had the one tournament streamed, OCIC, which neither of you guys were at. But even the people that were there, like most people, didn't end up on stream. Like I know Avrip quite famously sort of didn't get on stream at Worlds 2022, didn't get on stream at OCIC, and he it was quite close to not getting on stream at Worlds 2023 as well, due to them cutting the stream off after he'd been told that he was going to be on stream next. But he got there in the end. But it's just a very different vibe. And obviously, like we were able to stream the Perth regionals. But actually, maybe Mikey, you can sort of answer this, is because my assumption is that it is different. But how different is it battling sort of quote unquote on stream in Perth, where there's no face cam, there's no real audience, it's just sort of your phone happens to be being streamed, then actually being on stage with the cams on you, a huge crowd, noise and all, like it's not the same vibe, right?
No. So the big thing that the thing with Worlds that because I don't play with headphones in like some players do, and at Worlds you've got noise cancelling white noise headphones on, and that's the first thing that you're not really ready for. And then you're sitting on really comfortable chairs that you're not really ready for. And then you've got an umpire, a referee that's right on your shoulder as well, which is something that only really happens, other than when on stream at Perth, only really happens in finals when the pressure's on anyway. So it wasn't the same, like you feel really isolated on the stage. And I know that for me that was a big thing. Like you're almost like alone with your thoughts at that moment, instead of, because I'm a pretty big broad-shouldered guy, so even at the tables doing the normal battles during a tournament, I'm almost shoulder to shoulder with each of the guys next to me, and you can kind of joke and laugh and talk and things like that, in between battles, if they're in between battles as well. But the fact that my opponents didn't speak English really all that much, so I couldn't really have any banter there either. And then the big thing that you don't realise, you're looking out over the seats and the crowd is something, but it's the headphones that lock you in with the white noise, and there's no chatter in the background, which is what you're sort of used to.
Yeah, it's something that the Americans and the Europeans have a lot of chances to get exposure to, that we're sort of left in the dust a little bit. And so it is very much something you kind of have to adapt to on the fly, or at least, try to, when you get thrown up into that spotlight on the world stage, which, as you mentioned, not the greatest place to have to learn these lessons. But, I've got some confidence that, round two can go a little bit cleaner. But with that said, we've sort of, we've talked for about half an hour about sort of the past of the 2023 season through the World Championships. Let's start talking about this season, the 2024 championship, where we are sort of currently rocketing towards that World Championships. So question for you both, just to sort of kick us off. What were your goals going into this season? So originally, as we've sort of said on every episode now, originally the championship point target, the bar for qualifying was 300 CP. So, like, I'm assuming that both of you were planning to qualify again. So, assuming that's the case, sort of how were you planning to accomplish that? Like, were you looking to essentially, I'm going to go in and win a tournament, and that's how I'm going to qualify? Or were you really sort of strategizing where you were going to pick up your CP? Like, oh, I'm going to hit top 16 here, and I have to hit top 8 here. Like, and also we didn't have locals at that point. But where was your headspace at going into the season?
Yeah, for myself personally, I knew I wasn't going to have much opportunity to travel this season. So my headspace was either I qualify at Brisbane or I don't go to Worlds, because there was no local format at that time. And, you had to win Brisbane to qualify. So my headspace going into Brisbane was, right, if I don't make it here, I'm probably not going to end up going. And, the result I got was 7th, and I lost to some really good players in Stumpy, 25, 17, and Valiant Vish. Made it to top 8, and I had a good performance, and I was happy with that. But I left with a bit of a sour taste after thinking that, well, that's it for me. Hawaii's off the cards. I'm going to have to just save my bickies, take it easy, and come back for 2025. So there's a bit happened between now and then, but that was sort of where my head was at going into Brisbane for sure. I was like, all right, here's my opportunity. If I don't make it, then that's tough cookies essentially.
Yeah, I my personal situation's changed from last year, where I actually have a lot more free time and I've got a lot of frequent flyer points. So I
That's
I
so
decided
awesome.
before the season started that I wanted to travel to all 3 regionals anyway, and I sort of thought, I really just wanted to get the reps in tournament situation, and I wanted to qualify. I knew that eventually we would get locals, and so long as I did well enough in those regionals, I could probably qualify. And also the fact that they changed the prize money pool, the way that worked this season, made a big difference as well. Because I remember at Sydney, coming third, you got $250 previous season. You come third now, you get what, $1,500? Like it's a big difference. So yeah, that was my plan. I just wanted to enter as many tournaments, get into the headspace to do those reps as much as possible, because I knew that I had a number of things that I needed to work on about my game, and because there's a number of aspects towards PvP that you need to get right, and I worked on a different one for each tournament essentially, which was one of the reasons why I was really excited to go to all 3, and really wanted to come over and visit Debbie.
Yay! Someone finally did. I've been asking every single podcast.
Every time it's like, oh, I don't want to have to travel to Perth. It's too far away. I don't want to bother. But
It's official. Mikey's my favorite now.
What do you mean now?
You need a token Pokemon. The Flareon's gone. No, kidding.
Lapras.
I'll look for a pin. Yep. Okay, done. No, now just honing back into Brisbane. Now, this is you both got. Am I correct in saying you both got the same placing in Brisbane for the Brisbane regional?
That is true. That's correct.
Opposite brackets.
And if you check the results website, I actually finished 7th, Mikey 8th on alphabetical order. So
I see.
I remember that from the leaderboard update with the championship points at the end.
Yeah, that's right.
Although, Fishylegs, I do believe you said something along the lines of, Mikey Morgs would have to get used to seeing your name above his on the leaderboard. I'm not. Is that held up or?
No, we call that trash talk, Steve, where I'm from.
Because it's the type of talk that belongs in the trash? Or?
Yeah. Speaking pure Garbador. But
that was quality.
Unfortunately,
although I would have said, pure trubbish, but whatever.
Whatever it is. No, so Mikey's travel budget was probably a bit higher than mine, and he made his way up the championship points leaderboard a fair way. So kudos to him. I just wanted to rub a little bit of salt into the wound, was all.
No, it's fair enough. But, we don't have to go through round by round like we would usually do. Cause there's a lot of the season sort of after Brisbane, but I guess we'll start with you, Fishylegs, just because this was, sort of your one and done, in some sense, regional tournament of the season. How is Brisbane regionals for you? What sort of stands out? I personally have some memories of your third round in Brisbane, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. Mate, you spend this entire podcast just talking yourself and bringing yourself into the conversation, Steve.
Well, yeah. Why else would I be here? That's
why he has the podcast, right?
Yeah, that's why I'm one of the hosts. It's yeah. I'm trying to make it all about me here.
This is correct.
Yeah, I'm not good enough to get invited onto other podcasts. So this is it.
Just so we're clear, I'm pretty sure I heard you on another podcast about 2 months ago.
I think it was about 1 month ago actually, and by the time this has been released, I think the same podcast about a week ago. But that's
come off it, brother. Come on. Anyway, back to Brisbane. So my first round was up against Anacor, who you may know from the Battle Cats podcast. And he'd been obviously doing a lot of work with Caleb Peng on his game, and he's a very talented battler. So going into a game against Anacor round 1, I was a bit nervous. I knew he was aiming for the top. So I put on my A game against Anacor and managed to get the 2-0 against him. So I was happy with that start, right? A good strong start against a strong battler. And then I come up against Stumpy. And Stumpy and I had a really close set. And game number 3 was pretty horrendous for me in that I led. It was basically I got triple hard countered by Stumpy and only lost by about 1 HP in the end. So I was devastated because I felt like I played really well, but still got kicked down to that losers bracket after round 2. So that was like, oh man, we're in a bit of a pickle here. It's going to get tough. And then I saw my round 3 opponent and thought, I'm going to have to just call it a day. It's too hard. Up against Steve 7.
That guy. Yeah.
That guy. Yeah. And he's poltergeist Dusclops. Luckily for me, I actually know my Dusclops counts, and I shielded I think every poltergeist you threw.
Yeah.
And I think
Could
I know
not land one.
Every ice punch. So I was happy with that. Sorry, Steve. And then a familiar face in Basher Bolgod in round 4, who's always been a tough opponent for me at Brisbane. And then Zan Zaid in round 5, and we had a weird spot of lag, which ended up not affecting the game, but it was a tight match, and I won that one once again by the skin of my teeth. So pushed my way onto the top 8 from there to come up against Valiant Vish. And tale as old as time, I got swept by Vish. So
with the afterbacks.
The afterbacks, Vish.
Vicious.
Should have brought the Clefable in.
So that was my Brisbane experience. A little bit sad that I couldn't make it any further, but I lost to 2 brilliant trainers. So I wasn't upset with that.
It's fair enough. It's always a little bit of a crapshoot when you have to face one of these, absolute titans. How it's going to go, it can really go either way. Because I think you guys are also coming into this first tournament of the season as 2 of the 10 battlers that were representing Australia at Worlds. So it's not like you didn't have targets on your backs yourselves, but obviously, having to take on Stumpy, who ended up coming second in the tournament, and then Valiant Vish, who I want to say finished up 4th. I think he was top 4.
Yeah, Vish was 4th. And look, that was the other thing about Brisbane too, was that there was a bit of pressure of being a Worlds qualified player. someone who competed at Worlds and coming back in and feeling a bit like, well, I have to, prove my performance again. So I probably put a bit more pressure on myself than I needed to, especially knowing that that was my one and only tournament that I was planning to go to. So headspace was a bit all over the place, but looking back, I'm happy with my result from that tournament.
Yeah. Plus, you're one of the only 3 people this season to top 8 with Clefable. So,
Yeah, that's another thing. Clefable was a little bit of a spice pick, but it was really good at breaking the core at the moment of the time. That was Frostlass Metacham, which I ended up facing against 3 of those cores, and then a couple of other targets like Carbink and Mandibuzz at the time. So it was good to have that pressure. A couple of my opponents didn't have a really good check for the Clefable, so it was quite nice. But then Stumpy had Registeel, and that made it really hard.
Those damn steel types.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, look, it's still a really nice performance, and obviously the season ended up changing for you in ways that turned out quite nice in the end. But yeah, I can imagine the disappointment at the time. But Mikey, for you going to Brisbane, obviously you mentioned you were sort of planning to go to all 3. So where was your headspace at? Were you feeling that same pressure that Fishylegs mentioned in terms of rocking in as a Worlds qualified battler, or did you sort of blocked that bit out?
Yeah, maybe a little bit, but I don't know. I felt like I was pretty calm, and I felt pretty controlled and pretty prepared coming into it. In terms of what I worked on before this tournament was, the analogy I use is if you're playing golf, right? If you're playing golf, you've got a couple of key areas that you can work on in your game. And the first thing to work on is to work on your driving, your long game. And your driving and your long game in PvP is your team selection and your team building. So it's your selection of 3 and the team of 6 that you bring. And so that's something that I worked on a bit on. I worked with Scarlet Wiz from India, because he used to be my my old faction. And so I felt like I brought a pretty balanced team that I was quite comfortable with. And because of that, I didn't really feel too much of the pressure during the tournament. I think that the 2 battles that I felt the most pressure was probably the 2 battles that I lost. And they were really close. They were really close. So I played Braggio match 1. And I think I led Shadow A/ into his Carbink both games. I then played a battler that I'd not heard of before called Veeks in round 2. And from memory, I think he won the first game against me there. But I thought that I had a pretty decent matchup against him. I don't really remember how that went. I then had another player from the Gold Coast called Magic Ninja that I've battled maybe 7 or 8 times in GBL since then, and once in a local as well. And he's awesome, really nice bloke, really good guy. And we had a pretty it was a pretty back and forth match, but I managed to get alignment in both of those. And then I had a battle against Rick in round 4 that was really, really tight. I'll be honest, I got a bit distracted in game 1, and he swapped in a Medicham and was able to snipe my A/, and I shouldn't have let him do that. But the other 2 matches were really close, and yeah, he won 2-1 there. That was really tight. And then I played against a Japanese battler named Flatiron, who I hadn't met before, and again, he took a match off me there. He took game 2 off me. But he led Medicham all 3 games, and I basically didn't bring my A/ for the first 2 games, and baited him into bringing Shadow A9. And I trapped Shadow A9 with A/ in game 3 to win that. And then I played Yakko, who I think we can all agree is probably the form battler in Australia right now.
Mr. Top 5 on the leaderboard.
Yeah, Mr. Top 5 on the GBL leaderboard as of yesterday. And, I had I had a really crazy, really close, really good set with Yako. In fact,
It was great to watch.
game 3, he won in a timeout victory. And if the battle had gone another 5 seconds, I would have won, or another 2 counters worth of time, I would have won. But yeah, the one time in his life he's baited, I shielded. But yeah, it was great. It was really good. It was fun. Yeah.
I do remember watching that last battle, and everyone was a little bit unsure as to sort of who was about to win, because obviously we were watching the battle and it was like, oh, like, you know, Mikey's looking really good here, and then the timer popped up and we were like, oh,
Yeah. I led Mandibuzz into his Umbreon.
Yeah.
And then about, I don't know, maybe a minute and a half into that battle,
Someone switched.
I swapped Licky into his Umbreon and he just stayed in.
Oh no!
And so it just went on because I just built up a lot of energy, and then we ended up in a Medi Mirror to finish the match. And I wasn't running Psychic; I was running Ice Punch, Dynamic Punch. I was running a Medi Slayer IV spread, and I was one Ice Punch from probably knocking out, and timeout. It was great though; it was good battle, but. So I wasn't too disappointed. At least Fishylegs didn't finish above me. Wow. And that was the thing that was most important, is that we finished at the same level.
And for context, for those at home, Mikey and I are from the sunny coast, so we live quite close by. I think it's a 10-minute drive, if that.
Yeah, if that, yeah.
So there's a little bit of a sunny coast rivalry that occurs.
Yeah, the talk is all with peace and love.
I think rivalry is good. Also, it's just kind of cute. You kind of like, you're both like from Queensland and both like landing at 7th place at Brisbane. I'm like, no.
And we both lost. The losses that the both of us had were against each of the top 4 from the tournament.
Yeah, true. Yeah, that's kind of wild. Losing to number 1 and number 3 and then number 2 and number 4. That's pretty solid. So, I mean, you know, those, you know, Gone and Mr. Lay just snuck into the top 6 separately.
Yeah, I don't know who let them in, but actually, fun fact, if we go back to 2023 Brisbane, Mr. Lay was my first opponent round 1. Way back in the day.
Okay.
In a very close 2-1 that I won. So he's obviously come a long way to finish top 6 at Brisbane this year.
Yeah, no, good on him. He was also someone who popped up for me. Like, I didn't really know who he was prior to him showing up to, maybe it was Brisbane that sort of last year, but he's done pretty well on the whole. So it's definitely someone to sort of keep an eye on in the shadows. But so both of you, you know, come out of Brisbane in that top 8, get some championship points at this point. Well, I guess most of your story, Fishylegs, ends up coming back around after locals are reintroduced. So we will sort of circle back to that. But I guess, you know, just because he's here, we do have to talk about Melbourne and Brisbane. I mean, and obviously, Mikey, the reason that we've brought you both onto this podcast is because you also had a really cool and funny and smart opponent at Melbourne. And, you know, seeing as we're really trying to fit in our Steve quota on this one. Maybe
I did, that really funny and smart opponent. That was Avrip. He knocked me out. But I played some other weirdo from Newcastle that was running Buzzwall and a best buddy Wizcash.
Oh man.
No, I jest and kid. So I'll race through these 2 tournaments because I understand that I've been talking a lot and we've talked a lot so far. Melbourne, first Melbourne tournament, and that was good. I knew it was going to be pretty big and it was pretty stacked and there was a lot of players. It was pretty large. It was about a little bit bigger than Sydney was. And so I went 3-2 and I finished 13th or top 16. So I still got 80 championship points. I was pretty disappointed, actually, with my performance. But the 2 battlers that I lost to, again, like in Brisbane, were pretty strong, and they both finished in the top 4. Actually, no, Rick didn't quite finish top 4.
No, he was top 6.
Tied 5th, I think. but both Worlds competitors, both Day 2 Worlds Yokohama. So both strong battlers. So yeah, this was when Annihilate had just been released. I hadn't really practiced with it all that much. I didn't love my team or feel super confident with it, but yeah, I played Pokemon Master Spud. Pretty decent game. So 2-0, Slightly, which I went 2-0 against as well. Rick, which I had, really, really, really close best of 3, and I lost 2-1. I feel like our games are always really, really tight. Then I battled Steve7, who, he was running Buzzwall, which was, a really good-looking and handsome pick. And they were actually pretty close games. I think didn't I caught, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but I caught like something on my Shadow Gligar that was a super effective move. Do you remember, Steve, in game 2?
I feel like, I didn't run Buzzwall. I sort of left that aside against your team. So I feel like I was running a Whiscash a lot. Cresselia might have come in against you. So maybe it was throwing Grass Knot into...
No, you know what it was? It was you threw Scold with your Whiscash, and I caught it on my Shadow Gligar, so I didn't have to use a shield, and so I would be able to maintain the energy on Annihilate. And I caught it on a full health Shadow Gligar. So when you look at it, it was a stupid play to make, but that was the reason I did it, because I needed the Shadow Ball to take out Azu, I think. And then I played Averitt in my final match, and I mean, he's really strong. And game 1,
he's also a good battler.
Yeah, he's a good battler too. And game 1, I remember it came down to, I had to call whether it was a Power Whip or a Body Slam from Lickitung and my Shadow Whiscash. And I called that it was Body Slam and it was a Power Whip. And that was game. And then I don't really remember game 2, but I think game 2, I might have led Skarmory into his Licky, and that matchup sort of got me. So, not super proud of that performance, but it was enough to get some championship points and see everyone down there. And it was just the new change of meta. And it is what it is. And then Perth. So Perth was great. Perth was fun. I've never been to Perth before. It's a beautiful place filled with beautiful people like Aaron and Debbie.
Oh, he's buttering me up here now.
And in Perth, I got matched up against Averitt game 1, round 1, and
it's a good thing we've got seeding at our local tournaments.
Yeah, I was chatting to Ross, and he was talking about implementing it next season, because that was pretty tough. Like, that was a tough round 1 matchup, and he was thinking, Averitt was thinking the same way. And our matches were crazy close because we've got almost identical teams. You swap out his Licky for my Cress, and other than those two, it's the same 5 Pokemon. Game 1 I won, game 2 I lost. Game 3, I had Scarm in the back, he had Lantern in the back, which should be an auto loss. It actually came down to, there was a couple of turns worth of lag in game 3 right at the end that stopped me from landing a Thunderbolt on his Lantern, which was the final matchup of the game. I don't know how I got to that point, but I did. But it might not have knocked out, so I didn't dispute with Trotter because we were on stream, so he was watching. Well, we were in the stream seats, but it was round 1, so it was the test round essentially. But really close games, and I wasn't sure whether it would have flipped it or not. So I thought rather than dispute it, I'd keep locked in because I knew I played pretty well given how strong he is. And then I had to run the gauntlet in the losers bracket because I lost round 1. So I played Lily Bear that had a terrifying Shadow Girafarig. Managed to complete that
She
game.
loves that one.
Then I played El Calvissimo, who I've played a lot in Sylph over the years, and I've never even taken a game off him. And I won game 1, and then game 2. Game 2, I led Lantern into his Lickitung, safe swap Cress, and he brought in Skarmory, and then he had Shadow Gligar in the back, and I had Annihilate, and I managed to win that, which was pretty good. Actually, I was pretty pleased with that. Then I played Rob Dog. Unfortunately for Rob, in game 2, he brought in a regular Gligar instead of his Shadow Gligar, so he got DQ'd on game 2.
Oh no!
I won game 1, and then he got DQ'd game 2, which was a real shame. Then I played Fish on a Heater, which was crazy battles, just mental. Game 3, I wish was recorded because that was out of control. There was at one stage where we both paused for about 3 or 4 turns in a row because he had Skeledirge in and I had Scarm in. And yeah, in that game 3, he blinked first essentially and swapped Guzzlord, and I did 2 Steel Wings, and I Brave Birded his Guzzlord, and then Gligar swept it up. But we both, we were both chatting in Bologna, and we both agreed that it was a crazy game. And then I played 89 Flames, who some people may know. 89 Flames fan, he's only about 13 or 14 years old, but he has hit 3,500 ELO on the GBL leaderboards each of the past 2 seasons. So he's very talented up-and-coming trainer, and I managed to sweep him. I know how he plays because I've been in a server with him for a long time, so I know he likes to play a bit of the alignment game, and I managed to get him on alignment. And then I came up against Z-Tarb, who was running just a weird team.
The Mantine, the Clodsire.
Yeah. And to be honest, in game 1, I got distracted taking notes and forgot to click the shield button. And he ice beamed my Altaria, and that was game over. And then game 2, I lost my Shadow Gligar lost CMP against his Shadow Whiscash, and the Scold, basically one hit KO it. He played really strongly, really well, and the next day we went to that local tournament at Rockingham, and he won it. From memory, I think he won it, didn't he, Deb?
He did, with the same team as well.
Same team as well, yeah. Mm-hmm. He played really, really well, and he finished top 4. So I only lost to players that had either qualified for Worlds or finished top 4 this season during the Australian circuit. So I was pretty pleased with that, and that was top 5 finish. And with that finish, I managed to qualify for Worlds.
Yeah, you qualified for Worlds while we were on stream. I think that was something that we actually celebrated on stream, Steve and I, when we saw it. Oh yes, and Fishylegs.
I was not a Perth, but I was there. I was there in spirit, casting the tournament, and it was great watching all my mates play, and being able to see Mikey qualify amongst a bunch of other Aussies at the time who managed to qualify for Worlds as well, including I think Rocket Claire and did Avrip also qualify at Perth? Yeah. So that was great.
It was Rick, Rocket Claire, Avrip, and Mikey.
Yeah, four battlers. That's crazy. Hey,
I mean, plus enabling even more to qualify. Like, obviously Z-Tarb
qualified the next day, didn't he?
Yeah. Actually, I think he still needed a bit more.
He needed another cup straight after, and that was, only a couple of weeks away. So, he pretty much sealed it by just turning up.
Nice. Yeah.
Oh, no, Gon qualified like a fortnight later as well.
Yeah.
He qualified from EUIC, I believe.
No.
Oh, no. Gon qualified from locals. Yeah.
Locals, okay,
yeah. It was very... Perth was... Obviously, it was the last regional of the season, so people had sort of grinded up points for the last 3 regionals, and some locals had kicked off the last month and almost a half-ish from where Perth was actually hosted, but it was very much the last chance for a big influx of points for most people. And so it was definitely a bit of a make or break. But yeah, Fishylegs.
It was a pretty small tournament, Steve, but it was pretty stacked. There were a lot of very strong players, like Shinlina that flew down from Malaysia because he had a wedding or something. And he qualified through the APAC qualifiers for Worlds.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, second place with that Gudra, which was pretty wild. Those battles are on
Pretty
Rise to
good, I
Occasion's
would say.
channel as well. Yeah, you would say that.
I would. You're right.
But Mikey, you sort of hit the nail on the head there, and we did mention that when we talked about Perth, however many weeks ago now, that it was a very concentrated tournament of talent. In that it was just big, and obviously, like you had people like Rob Drogo was obviously there, with Avrip and Rob Drogo obviously trying to go in for that third regional in a row where they were first and second. Unfortunately, didn't quite get there this time around, but Adam still getting that qualification from the regional, which was pretty sick as well. But
and then we had Rocket Claire, that's been one of the best performers this season. Back-to-back podiums, third place in Melbourne and in Perth. Incredible.
First female to qualify from the Oceania region.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But I mean, like, just what a performance! She's been to 2 regionals this season. She's finished third both times. That's consistency right there. That's really impressive.
Seriously.
And then Jai, they love Jai, who was actually my pick going into the tournament to be probably the winner or very close to it. He was the danger. I mean, outside of Rick, like Rick is Rick. If Yako's not in a tournament in Australia, Rick is the favourite. And he has been for years, He's one of 3 people that's qualified for day 2 at Worlds in both World Championships. So like he's always the favourite that when Yako's not there. And even then, it's kind of a coin flip. I mean, Brisbane came down to one fast move.
Yeah.
But Jai, really impressive performance too. So, it was a really strong tournament with some really great players.
Yeah, it was sort of like, not only were there obviously a lot of strong players like yourself, like, Claire, who again on an absolute tear, Rick Flareon, but I feel like it was a bit of there were a lot of people who weren't really known before that did incredibly well as well. Obviously, like a lot of people sort of met They Love Jai for the first time out of this tournament. Zetar, but only ever played in Perth, the regional beforehand, like the 2023 season. Bandit Beartick sort of popped out of nowhere and finished top 6 after, taking down They Love Jai. And actually, no, he ended up losing to They Love Jai. I think in the winners bracket, but like it's just sort of these names that sort of maybe shining a spotlight out there that there are still more stories to write. There are more people that are sort of popping up that are really good at the game in the Oceanic region. It's not just, we had 10 people that qualify last season and they're the only 10 who are any good. Like there's more names.
And then you've got someone like El Calvilsmo that was 13th at Hartford. That came in and he was out losers round 2.
Yeah, it speaks to the level of stackedness that this tournament was really had going for it. But obviously, like, that's from the competitive side. And Fishylegs, you sort of touched on it, but obviously you were casting there with Debbie and I alongside, Mr. Rise to Occasion, dialing on in. What was that like for you? Because again, we haven't had you on the podcast since literally episode 1 of the podcast with Valiant Fish way back when. So yeah, what was that like for you dialing in?
Yeah, I mean, I was starting to think that you guys didn't like me anymore. To be honest.
Oh, no.
I sort of forgot you were here, to be honest.
Yeah, that was a bit rough. No. Perth was a lot of fun, actually. Getting to cast with you two and Rise was really, it was so much fun, and I had a great time. It was a long day in the chair. I was sort of stuck in my bedroom for about 6 hours, but it was good. I felt really, really privileged to be able to showcase and commentate on some of Australia's finest battlers and actually put us on a screen to be seen worldwide. Unfortunately, it's not the big screen that we get for the EU and NA circuit, but it was, it's a great starting point, and I think the production went really, really well, and everyone had a great time who was involved, and I think it was, a really awesome opportunity for Australia as a competitive scene.
It's a big first step, I guess. in sort of getting to that level of what word am I looking for here? That we matter in some sense, just because I think we are quite forgotten about in the grand scheme of things, because no one sees any of the battles, no one really knows how good we are, and it's a bit of an ask for people to watch. What we'd put together for the last few regionals, where we've just got cameras over people's shoulders with a slight bit of shaky cam, the phones moving around, and Zoe trying to follow it around. It's
commentating the Brisbane recap as opposed to Perth was definitely a different experience. Perth was a lot smoother. It was great having a live feed, not the over the shoulder cam. I think Mikey, you even put in some footage for that one, hey?
The Melbourne one, yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
The Melbourne over the shoulder cam. And I will say, yeah, Perth was fantastic. It was really, really strong, really well put together stream. It looked fantastic. It looked professional. In fact, I think it looked better than having face cams. I preferred it to the face cam shots that you sometimes get.
From a community stream sort of vibe.
Yeah. Shout out Miss Mystic.
Yeah, shout out Miss Mystic. Absolute goat.
I think maybe for the next one that we do, rather than having face cams, you should do a helmet cam on Dr. Trotter or whoever the judge is. Maybe you can see both at the same time. I think that's the way we do it.
Just put a gimbal and a helmet on, yeah.
The battlers themselves have the GoPro 360 on, and you just get everything.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's not over the shoulder cam; it's from the forehead cam from an hour.
Yep.
So whenever Yakko looks off to the distance, whenever he's thinking about whether he shields or not,
and you come back 30 seconds later into the game, it's half done. And you go, "What has been going on?"
It's a thought for sure.
Now, at this point, Mikey, you've qualified. So how did you feel knowing that you've qualified for Worlds straight after Perth?
Yeah, it was good. I was pretty pleased. Look, I mean, I was pretty close anyway. I think I was on 240 or 245 points or something.
Yeah, you were.
And I knew that I had a couple of locals lined up in Queensland too, because we'd already had some locals. But it was really nice to be able to get that done. And to get it done and lose round one, and then be able to have the mental fortitude, I guess, to then keep winning games and to stay in the tournament. And how I mentioned earlier that when you talk about PvP for Pokemon Go, it's a bit like your golf game, and so you've got your team composition and your team selection as your long game, and then your short game can come down to your game mechanics, like your move timing and team reading and your switching and that sort of thing. And then I think that your mental side with your toughness and your ability to stay alert regardless of what scenario you're in, I think that's your putting, and that's the thing that separates the good players from the great players from the very, very best players. And guys like Rick and Yakko and Dunebug, and after being in Bologna, watching Colin Six play, especially, their mental side is what makes them elite on top of everything else. They don't get rattled. And being able to work on that for Perth and actually lose round one to have to put myself through that, I think was a really important experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I think it's just such a great achievement though. Once you sealed it, and and you've worked on it. You've worked on every, I get the golf analogy. My I used to work at a golf club. So when you were just mentioning everything, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. But yeah, just all the little components, refining your game, all the little 1%ers, and I think it's paid off for you for this season. So again, big congratulations there.
Thank you.
Now heading into now we're just mentioning about locals. Now, Fishylegs, this is where your run, we're circling back into now. This is where your run picks up again through here. So at what point, or I suppose when locals was announced, did you think going, you know what, maybe the dream is still alive?
Yeah, it honestly took a while. So I probably have to credit Mikey a lot for pulling me down to some of the locals, because I wasn't really going to go. I'd sort of, made peace with 7th at Brisbane, not going to Hawaii this year. That is what it is. But Mike was like, "Oh, come do some locals. We'll get stuck into it."
Hold on, so we're clear. He wanted to sign up for Melbourne, and the day that he looked to sign up, it had filled. And
Yeah.
I didn't say come do some locals. I drove to his house and put him in the car and drove him to the local. Okay.
It took some coercion, we'll say.
Yeah.
So, the first local I went, I thought, look, I'll go, I'll make up numbers. I'm still not expecting to qualify. And I'll go have fun. And I think I ran Shadow Machamp amongst a few other bits and pieces.
I love it. Awesome.
Yep. So I had fun with it. And came second to Mikey. And got myself 40 points, which put me at 140. I thought, 110 points to go, because we'd had our CP drop down to 250 by then.
Yes.
And I thought, I probably won't, there's no chance, right? Unless, but no, but maybe. And then I went and did a couple more locals, and I won the next cup that we did. I won the next 3 locals in a row, and then that got me over the line. I had one in Morayfield with Mikey, and Valiant Vish and Basher Bolgod were there. And I managed to sweep that tournament somehow, and then that put me 190. So that was getting really close.
Yeah, within striking range by that point.
Yeah, it's like just under 200 points. I'm like, there's actually probably a real chance here that I can qualify. But at that time in my head, I was like, even if I qualify, I've left it pretty late now to start getting myself organised to go to Worlds. And I didn't think I was going to be able to afford to, even if I did qualify. So even heading into the Gold Coast Cup that I won as well, I was still thinking, I'm 10 points off, but even if I qualify, I still can't really afford to go to Worlds, because it's not cheap to go international. And I wasn't going anywhere close to a travel stipend or travel award. And I ended up winning a local challenge a few weeks ago now, and got my final points to get across the line. But took some time, had a thought about it, and I thought, stuff it, I'll commit. I'm going to World. Everything's booked, everything's paid for, so we're on track.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose, talking about travel award, someone on this podcast, I believe, has got themselves a bit of a travel stipend.
I did. I was pushing to hopefully try and get that top 2 spot for a travel award. Unfortunately, just wasn't able to get over the line there. But I don't really mind that. I mean, it would have been great, but Yako deserved it this season. He had 2 regionals wins, and he wasn't able to travel to any locals or travel to Perth. So if the spot has to go to him instead, he definitely is deserving, I think, of that financial assistance. I think it would have just been nicer if OC got 3 of them instead of 2. That would have been the dream, but it is what it is. So it's good. It's good. A
stipend is still nice.
Yeah, it's good to have that help, especially after the 3-week trip to Europe just recently. So that definitely helps.
Yeah, for sure. Now we will talk about your European excursion, but is there anything like Fishylegs obviously talked about most of the locals in terms of you were basically hitting the same ones, but was there anything of note out of the locals for you, or was it really just really nose to the grindstone, trying to grind out those championship points to try and get as close to that travel award as possible? Like, was that the primary motivation?
I think Mikey was just rocking up to get second to me each time.
Except for the first tournament where I swept him without him winning, even getting close in any games. And, I had to make sure that I came second and it looked believable, or otherwise he wouldn't have qualified for Worlds. Not at all. I take back that comment. There was no match fixing occurring. No. Fishy went on a tear. Actually, I do want to say out loud, the two stores that we've done these tournaments at are both great, really great. The Moray Field Centurion Games is fantastic, and Demi is like the loveliest lady, loveliest woman, and she ran 4 tournaments essentially for us to go and play at, which is the only reason why Fishy's qualified, which was awesome. And then down at Good Games Gold Coast, and I feel terrible, I can't remember his name, but the guy that runs it, he's a TCG judge. He judged at an AIC, and so he runs like the most professional looking store down there, and he ran
was
3
also
tournaments.
He was at Yokohama as well.
He was at Yokohama. He was at Brisbane. I'm pretty sure he was judging at Perth, and he was definitely in Melbourne as well. So he's a TCG judge, and he runs these tournaments for us. And, it's a bit of a drive. It's a 4-hour round trip, but it's certainly worth it because of the championship points. I'll say that the locals for next season, I would love for us to be able to get even more, community uptake from it. I think we can get more stores involved if we get a larger base of people playing to get involved.
That's a note to you, Valiant Vish, if you're listening.
Yeah.
One is enough, mate. Get out there.
But on top of that, I think that it would be exciting if the same way that we see alerts coming up for NAIC, for ICs and World Champs in game. If there could be alerts that come up, or like with gyms and Pokestops, if you've got because a lot of these stores have the sponsored Pokestop, I would really love to see some sort of option that takes you to that store that tells you any upcoming events. I think that would be a really good way to open the channel of potentially getting more people invested and joining in with these tournaments, because I know even when I'm looking for where the events are on and when the local tournaments are on, it's hard to find. Even when you're looking for it, it's a minefield, and it's quite difficult.
Well, the most likely integration that we would actually see would be through Campfire. Now, I don't know if it's the case everywhere. Maybe it was just a coincidence because, like, I was in South Africa for this last community day, and I actually did get an in-game alert, like telling me, like, oh, a local meetup.
Yeah, no, those happen.
I was going to go anyway.
Those happen, you're right, where it's local community meetups. But I mean for the local tournaments at the store, if there was some way that you could click through from in-game. Because I know that from my perspective, most PvP players aren't using Campfire either. But most of these stores have a sponsored Pokestop.
Yeah, I guess I'm just suggesting that I don't know if Niantic would want to put that work in for the method you're proposing, as useful as it would be for us. Whereas they want to promote Campfire. That is like a clear goal of theirs. They want to promote Campfire. They want people to join these Campfire communities. So maybe that's where the compromise lies, in something that they would actually be willing to do for us poor PvP folk who don't have much else going on from Niantic HQ. But I don't know.
We're still waiting for those regional champion shirts, aren't we?
Yeah. There's a bit of a backlog. But with that said, I mean, let's talk about the big trek. And actually, if we didn't say before, also massive congrats to Fishylegs as well for
World's qualified
into it and getting that world's qualification. So let's go.
See you in Hawaii.
See you in Hawaii, trainers. But so Mikey Morgs went on his little European trek after locals had already shut up shop for one last chance at championship points. Obviously, that's not why you're actually there, but you were there. So tell us sort of about this experience, because none of us, like the rest of us, the only international tournament we've been to was Worlds last year. So, tell all. What's
first up? It was a special event. It wasn't a regional, right? So correct. Special event essentially has all of the same bearings that a regional does, except for prize money. That has to do with the nationality laws about entering tournaments and then receiving prize money. I don't really quite understand it, but it is that's the reason that it is that way. So this was I was in Florence a few days before it, which is only an hour or so south of there. So we thought that we'd just drive up and do it. Unfortunately, I got like really, really horrifically sick that week, to the point where I was bedridden the whole day and a half before we went up there. I couldn't drive, so my wife had to drive us. And I slept the whole way on the car, and I only really came good that morning. Even the night before, I was debating whether to go, and so I played a couple of really, really strong players in that, and I think we can all agree with EU, they have the highest concentration in terms of their median level of battler is probably the highest in the world. I think that, maybe NA, the top handful of players at the very, very top are the best, and are probably as good, if not better, than almost anywhere in the world, except, the top 2 or 3 players in LATAM. But I think in EU, their threshold for where their median level of high quality battler is higher than anywhere else, because they have a lot of exposure, and it's easier to travel to multiple big regionals. And so my first opponent was Raging Taz, who you might remember, Steve, from what Anikor was telling me. He was like a Sylph world champion in season 1 of Sylph or something like that.
Yeah. Back when there were essentially 3 world champions, he was the European one. So
and
pretty good.
He was really strong. And again, I was really off mentally because I was still exhausted from gastro, and I missed a couple of win cons I probably normally would have gone for. But yeah, he beat me, and then I faced Pablo Dinas in losers round 3, which was a pretty tough matchup, given that at that stage he was number 6 on the EU Championship board. And again, he beat me 2-0. And there were a few that I'm sort of matches that I'm win cons that I missed. I think I counted it up, and when I look back at the games, and in the 4 matches that I lost, there were 3 games that I probably had in total maybe 5 or 6 win cons that I missed because I just wasn't quite on there. And it's like when I was talking about the Sydney 2023 regional. If you're off by 5% against quality battlers, you lose. But if you're off by about 40%, you can't win. So unless you're hard up, yes, which doesn't really happen. So, but the tournament itself was sensational. The gameplay was cracking, was really good. This was a tournament where there were 2 Bastiodons in top cut, and there were 2 Shadow Magnazones in the top 3. And the other team in the top 3 had a Shadow Bastiodon, so it was, it was wild. It was really fun, really good battlers, really good to meet everybody over there. Colin 6 is just cool as a cucumber, so calm under pressure, and will take some serious beating at World.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think now that it is the season end of 2024, both of you are now Worlds qualified, and we've just gone through the experiences that you've had for this season, and I suppose now lies a question going, are we starting to prepare for Worlds? Are we starting to prepare for or even any plans for Honolulu? I suppose from the PvP side, but also holiday side?
Wow. Look, personally, like I mentioned, I didn't have many intentions of going until quite recently. So my World's prep is, I would say, about to start.
Awesome.
Now that Mikey's back from Europe, we've made some plans to put our heads together and see what shakes. The hint is it's probably a empty bottle of red is what shakes out of our heads. So I mean, personally, I don't have travel plans because I just wanted to make it to the event. I wanted to get there, make sure I got that done as my priority. So I'll be in on the Monday, out the following Monday. So not too much going on for myself, but I'm definitely going to start burying my head into a book and trying to remember how to play this game on a competitive level.
Yeah, I've got a couple of places to potentially hit up while we're in Hawaii. I actually got quite lucky, and there's a couple that live in Hawaii just outside of Honolulu that came into the shop the other night. So they gave me a few recommendations for things to do that aren't touristy, so they're not ultra expensive. I think that the most important thing when we get over there for those first couple of days is to arrest the jet lag. Jet lag when you travel east is significantly worse than jet lag when you travel west. So we
This is
didn't
correct.
experience it in Japan. Yeah, and you would know, Debs. Not making light of it either. Like you actually feel it when you come east, even from as much as where you are.
Sucks so bad.
But you come from any further than that. I mean, I'm a week in and I'm a good sleeper, and I'm struggling to get more than 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night. And I had a 2.5, 3 hour nap on the couch today because it's hard. So going east, I think it's important that the first couple of days are planned out to really get over that and get in the right mindset. In terms of preparation, Fishylegs and I are doing some together. I just finished. I had my final exam on Monday for that uni semester, so I've got a little bit of time now where it's just sort of a bit of work. So yeah, I've got a plan for how we're going to attack it and what we're going to do gameplay wise to be ready for Worlds.
Yeah, look, I obviously I'm a big, well, not obviously, but I'm a big fan of Wolfie Glick, and watching his videos, like there's all of this discussion about how they've sort of been planning him having sort of a squad of people, and they all sort of brainstorm in the lead up to these big tournaments like an AIC, like Worlds. And obviously it's a different game. In VG, there's a lot more room for creativity and really wacky team builds. But I really do believe quite strongly that having multiple heads in the room to sort of bounce stuff off of can really be quite useful to sort of build something that not only that you're comfortable with going to Worlds, but also something that makes sense, that like it's gone through a logic check. And this goes back to even that OCIC, something that Fish and Ahita talked about when he came second at OCIC with quite a weird team at the time. Like that was in the middle of Trevenant Noctowl Lantern meta, and Fish came in with something quite a bit different and did quite well with it. And he was sort of saying that he would not have gone with that team if it wasn't for someone who was giving him some coaching, you say, who we had on the podcast a couple of weeks back, sort of giving him the nod of approval, like, yes, Fish, this makes sense. Like, this is actually a pretty decent team. So I
will add to that as well. You look at the EU region specifically, there are so many of those top battlers that are all in the Tea and Pizza Discord, the faction, and even at EU. And, witnessing it live, what you don't see on screen is that when one of those battlers comes off, they all give feedback immediately on the game. So I know that Colin came off stage, and he won both games, and Tomahawk immediately gave him 3 or 4 bits of feedback as to his gameplay, as to things that he didn't do that would have optimized. So that's something that I think is really important moving forward for OC to be able to perform at that sort of stage, because, you look at their performances and they're a lot of the most consistent performances, guys like Emmy Weedle, Tomahawk UK and Colin Six and Dean Oski. These are all guys that are performing at every single tournament, basically, and there's a reason for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's definitely something that we can learn from a little bit and try and look, we did really well in last year Worlds as a sort of collective, but we've got to shoot for that World Championship. So maybe this is our year. So, that's sort of the 2024 season in a nutshell. And thank you both for coming on. But
Thanks,
as you
guys.
may remember, and I'm sure that you've listened to every episode since, so you'll know that there is one last question to come. Well, technically 2 questions, because we are also going to ask about your socials. But before we ask that question,
Okay, so
random
to
question
answer this
of the day.
question before you ask it, yes, this is my favourite PvP podcast in Australia, and yes, Debbie, you are my favourite co-host.
Yes.
Oh, man. Oh, wasn't what I was going to ask.
Spoiler
but-
alert! Come on.
No, go ahead, ask the question. Go on.
Now I feel defeated. Maybe Debbie can ask. As your favorite host of the podcast and all. Go ahead, Debbie.
No, Steve, ask your question. It's okay.
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 Okay. So random question of the day, and it's sort of on brand, on topic. What is your favorite red?
Oh,
And I'm sure Fishy has a refined answer ready to go.
Fishy doesn't have a refined answer. I'll leave that to the connoisseur himself. However, I am a stickler for a Tasmanian Pinot Noir. It's Tassie's my home turf, and Pinot's the first red that I got sort of invested in. So that's where I land. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Mikey's still contemplating. His head's in the clouds. He's not quite sure what to make of that.
It's a really loaded, really difficult question because mine is better in different situations for different things.
The nearest and most open one.
I would probably have to go either Chambol Musigny or Moët Saint Denis. Red Burgundy. I think that the red wine that I have had that I could drink for the rest of my life without complaining would be Chambol Musigny Les Amoureux. But it's hard. Maybe if I just say red Burgundy, that's probably the best way to go, which is Pinot, which is from Burgundy in France. Nerello Mascalese from Mount Etna is amazing, and it's a hard question.
Okay, well, can I just say kind of weird answers? Because, I was looking for like maroon or like, dark red. I'm not really sure what you guys are on about, but all right. well,
Ruby.
We'll write that into the form, I guess. But it's what it is. But no,
Steve, what's
seriously.
your favorite red?
Oh, I'm a big fan of Magic Carp Red. That's where I'm landing. But yeah, with that said, really do appreciate you guys coming on the podcast again. It's been a while, but always good to see you, and really looking forward to hanging out with you guys again if you'll have us in Honolulu. Because I can only I feel like I can speak to Debbie here, but we definitely both had a pretty good time sort of hanging out with the Aussies on that world's quest. So looking forward to seeing you guys. But yeah, the actual last questionino is, where can we find you? What are your socials? Which will be linked in the doobly-doo if you're on one of those platforms that has a doobly-doo. But just so it's in word format as well, I guess. And maybe, hints towards future streaming as we're trying to get out of every single world's qualified battler. We're really trying to get that.
Mikey and I are both very frequent on the socials. We both just pulled up our Twitter app to double check what our usernames actually are. You can grab me on X or Twitter at BlairAustin20, or if you just search Fishylegs2, I'm sure it pops up there somewhere. Occasionally I make a rare appearance on twitch.tv/Fishylegs_2, but only on the rare occasion. We'll see what comes of that in the lead up to Worlds, as I'm going to be doing a lot more playing and battling, so we might turn on the camera every now and then.
Ooh.
We'll see. To be confirmed.
And I'm on X, Twitter, whatever it's called now, at mikeymorgs22. And nothing on Twitch yet, but that's hopeful to get a setup where I can make that work. Would be fun.
Nice.
And we have tossed up the idea of the two of us doing stuff together, but it's just difficult when Fishylegs is as in demand and as busy as he is. I'm just lucky that I was able to find this time to hang out with him at all.
Oh yeah.
Had to lock me down, tie me up.
It's a tough send, but we'll get there in the end. But look, I'm really looking forward to both of you definitely streaming in the future. And if you ever do need, any questions and all, Debbie and I are both here to answer all, because Look, I'll be honest, guys. I've done a couple Twitch streams this last week, and there is literally no one else streaming Pokemon Go when I finish streaming. So if you guys could have someone that I can raid into, that would be great. So,
All right, we'll look into it.
Yeah, okay, easy as. But no, seriously, again, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much to both of you. Thanks for all your hard work this season. I know that both of you, especially Steve, and well, both of you actually. I mean, you work tirelessly, Steve. You almost single-handedly financed the whole Perth stream, and I know that you got helped out with it in the end, but you still had to put your skin in the game, so to speak. So really appreciate your hard work to get us all recognised, and looking forward to seeing you be the main host of OCIC 2025.
Calling it.
Yeah. We could say that, but no, I really do appreciate it. And I will say, after that Perth stream, that was like really, really special. And of course, I'd be remiss to not mention mad shout out to everyone who did come in and support that GoFundMe as well, because it was really just nice to see that support come through from just everyone caring about the Oceanic region a little bit. But it was really nice afterwards, Mikey, specifically from you. Like, you really gave some really nice positive feedback immediately after, that really just set my mind very well. Like, yeah, this was well worth it. Not that I didn't have that opinion already, but it was really nice to hear the positive feedback afterwards, that it all seemed to go well. So thank you for that.
Excellent. Well, see you both in Hawaii.
Yeah, we'll see you there, boys. And looking forward to one of you being the world champion, I'm sure, especially after what you guys cook.
Yeah, I mean, we can't both finish same at Worlds again, right? Like, that would just be too much.
That'd be crazy.
Sunny Coast for the top two, I say.
Oh yeah, that'd be a finals for sure. So looking forward to it. But with that said, brings us to the end of the podcast. So as always, blah, 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 at G'day Battlers on all of the tweeters and the X's and the YouTubes and the Spotifys and the Apples and the whatever other podcast thingos there are. And be sure to give us a 5-star review on whatever it is if you haven't already. But with that said, we'll see you in the next episode, and we'll see hopefully everyone, literally everyone listening to this podcast right now in Honolulu in just a little bit. So yeah. How do we usually finish this, Debbie? Like, what are the last, I don't actually know what the last words are. Like, we just say bye, don't we?
Thanks and bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.